Hello and welcome to Makers.dev episode number 69. Chris, do you have anything funny or clever to say about the episode number for today?
I sure don't.
Shoot, I couldn't think of any either. Interesting. Cool. How's it going? What did you just get back from doing?
Oh, yes. So it's been 2 weeks since we talked on the podcast, but only a few days since we've seen each other in person.
Yes.
Yeah, we were
You
both
were
at MicroConf.
three-dimensional. You're
That's
a
right.
real, actual person.
That's right. Yeah, it was great. It was my first real trip since COVID started, and it was great to be around people again. Yeah, it was nice.
I loved it. It was, yeah. We've spent so much time working and chatting and doing the podcast and stuff. And before the pandemic, you were an acquaintance of mine at MicroConf, and I knew about the sort of stuff that you're doing. But we were more acquaintances than friends, and so it was really nice to see you in person. Like go out to eat and coordinate stuff. And Shai Schechter is at the same level as you in my brain of the amount that I interact with you online. So like, oh man, there was this moment I vividly remember of a conversation with the two of you in person. I was talking to both of you and you two were talking to each other. And I was just like, this is great. And we're all here in real life and we're going to go eat and eat the same food together. And yeah, it was really, really cool. I enjoy meeting up in person. Not the most practical thing day to day. I've got my whole network of stuff in Dallas, and it'd be great if you guys wanted to move to Dallas, but we've all sort of got our own stuff and our own geography of what we need to do. But I really appreciated being able to have us all together. That was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, MicroConf is great because it's like everyone there sort of speaks the same language. And so, yeah, all the stuff we talk about on the podcast, like, other than that, no one else in my life, I think, understands, like, what I do or, like everything that goes on. And so, yeah, it's just really cool to be in person. There's still something about being in person that it's just different than Zoom.
Particularly MicroConf. Let's dig into MicroConf first. I was talking to someone who it was their very first time at a MicroConf, but they'd gone to a bunch of other B2B SaaS conferences for software before. And I asked them how they liked it their very first time. I was like, oh, welcome to MicroConf. That's so cool. And they said, it's so different than the other software conferences I've been to. And I asked them to explain how, in what way is it different. And they thought for a second and thought, well, everyone's more authentic. There's a lot more posturing at other software conferences and a lot more name dropping and a lot more like sort of subtle like one-upsmanship in this game of that you can't overtly one-up them because then that's petty. So you sort of have to like drop hints as to how you're more important than the other person. But at this one, you can be talking to someone who, you idolize, who you listen to their podcast, and you can have a conversation that's like really real and very vulnerable with them. We had an experience like that chatting with Rob Walling, the founder of MicroConf. We were just chatting and like, that felt so cool that if we had that conversation several years ago when I was like wet behind the ears and just going to MicroConf for the first time, I just would have been dazzled of like, oh my God, it's a person from the internet and they're talking to me. But this one I just felt totally relaxed and I was like, yeah, here's some vulnerable things happening in my life. And he was like, oh, I had a similar experience, and felt like we were really making friends with him. So yeah, it was really cool. And this guy has so much more money than us. Like ran a company that was I think Drip at its height when Rob was running it had something like 100 employees. And we're just chatting with him. He's just a dude. Like all these people are real, actual people, and you can talk to them, and they all poop and they all eat. They all need to sleep. And I like about MicroConf that no one seems to be pretending to be something they're not. It's all authentic, real, like nerdy engineers who are trying to figure out how to do business.
Yeah, and I think that comes from the top. Like even like talk selection, there's always like a talk about some kind of mental health or like founder health, strategies and things like that. So like this year it was Sherry Walling talking about exits and like basically how they can feel at the same time great and also like terrible. Like
Yeah.
there's and so there's always at least one of those kind of talks. And then also the organizers, like they really recommend that you actually talk to people in the hallway, and they have a whole it's called the hallway track, like sort of informally, right? But yeah, so I think everybody from the top down is really focused on connecting as people instead of just coming to listen to talks. So yeah. And Same here. My first microconfs, I remember really listening to the talks and getting a lot out of those. But yeah, as it's gone on, like you can, there's only so many tactics, right? And you hear them, and it's good to be reminded of them. But yeah, it just becomes more and more about the people. Although there are still like things I took out of every talk probably that are still very interesting and not that I hadn't heard before, but maybe think about things in a different way. So yeah, talks are still great too.
Same. I have some 3 key takeaways from the talks and conversations at MicroConf. I did want to mention briefly though, like as I've gone to more MicroConfs, they've felt very different to me, and I don't think it's MicroConf that's changing. I think it's me that's changing. The very first one I went to, I I was just so excited and scared and like didn't know anyone, and I think I was like 24 or 25. And one of the first talks I saw was a talk by Rob Walling talking about how he was growing. I think it was Drip at the time, and I'm sitting there taking copious notes just because that's what I do. And he pulled up a slide and he was like, and then we did this thing and we were making $15,000 a month. And I was like, oh my God, $15,000. That's so much. And then he was like, and then 3 months later we grew to $25,000 a month. And I was like, a month? Is that a mistake? Is he saying a year? And then he was like, and then $60,000 a month. And I was on my calculator, 60,000 times 12. Oh my God, that's so much money. And just every talk was hitting me like that of, SEO is a thing, and you can do things to rank higher on Google. That's amazing. That after my second or third MicroConf, the major categories of things, there's not that many entire categories of new information of like raising your prices or like marketing channels or like the importance of talking to customers. The things that I get out of it now are much more nuanced, and it's yes, of course, do this thing, but here's a particular way that you can be doing it. Here's a strategy, or here's a way that you can be measuring how well you're doing. And went from my first MicroConf, like meeting a bunch of people and just being starstruck of like, oh my God, it's Justin Jackson. Whoa, it's Josh Kaufman, the author of one of my favorite books, to later on, it's like, these are all friends. These are all people who I'm just happy to see and get updates on their life and get their insight on your own life. And that's really cool. I feel like I'm maturing in whatever this thing is, community.
life
Yeah.
Maturing in life. Yeah, same here. You mentioned 3 takeaways. What were your 3 takeaways?
Takeaway number 1 by Asia Orangio. Orangio. She told me how to pronounce it. She speaks Italian. I think it's Orangio. She changed her name recently after getting married. Temporarily focus on a segment instead of niching down. I have gotten so in my head about this concept of niching file inbox down that like I could become file inbox for accountants, or even better, I could become file inbox for tax accountants who specialize in tax accounting for gymnastics facilities. And that's just an overwhelming problem to me because it feels like a trapdoor decision. Like if I niche down, what if I pick the wrong niche? What if after I niche down and I invest all this time and energy into niching down, it was actually the wrong niche to pick? I felt so paralyzed by this for so long in file inbox, sort of lamenting that like, man, ConvertKit's strategy of niching down into food bloggers, and then it was like paleo food bloggers who were specifically women, I think. How much easier that is to grow if you can so narrowly define your customer segment. But I felt like File Inbox was this very horizontal product that like I didn't know which of those niches to focus on. And I think my efforts in that have been trying to answer the question like, what is the best niche? And that just seems like an overwhelming problem. I don't know how to answer that because the best is like highest LTV, but it's also like, who do I enjoy working with the most? And it's also like, who is the easiest to get into contact with? It's a very hard problem. And Asia's talk, which you can read the recap of at recap.app, the new home for my MicroConf recap stuff, was not to frame it as niching, but to frame it as you're just temporarily focusing. For her number was 6 months. I think I'm going to do a little shorter than that. But if you do that, you just say like, okay, for the next period of time, I'm going to focus on a niche. I'm going to focus on a vertical, a segment of my audience. So for me, that would look like, okay, for the next 3 months, I'm going to focus on things I can do in marketing for sign printers. And I immediately, in saying that, I have these old fears in my head of like, are you sure you want to do sign printers? Because
Right.
what if that's not actually the best? And what if they're not? And the answer is like, who cares? Because I'm not changing my overall branding. That's just focusing. I'm just making some landing pages for sign printers, and I'm just adding some onboarding things of like, are you a sign printer? You probably want these sorts of forms to start up with. And I'm focusing on like, what are places where sign printers hang out that I can buy advertisements on? Talking to sign printer podcast hosts and seeing if I can get influencers in the sign printing industry to talk about File Inbox, give it to them for free. And then I go to another niche, and that's fine. There's no, I'm not tied to that. It's not a trapdoor decision. That's not going to change the overall branding of File Inbox. It was a very subtle shift of like, instead of niching, you're just focusing. But that felt really freeing when I heard her say that. What are your thoughts on my takeaway number one? Niche. Instead of niching, focus.
Yeah. I had a similar sort of revelation from that talk, which is, like, I mean, you can have many different focuses. As a solo dev, you should do one at once, right? But then, after 5 iterations of this, you'll have like 5 different landing pages. Like your main page will still be relatively generic, but you'll have like 5 different things that focus just on those niches, right? And the other thing, which you kind of mentioned, is one of the huge benefits to this is what so Nathan Barry found with ConvertKit. He has this Twitter thread, which I think he wrote a long time ago, but is now resurfacing, which is how he grew ConvertKit at the beginning. And one of the ways he did that was by focusing. And one of the huge benefits that he saw was that, like, say you're talking about like paleo food bloggers, right? There are, I don't know, I mean, at least before when he was doing it, there was, I don't know, maybe like 100 of them like that are super successful, or maybe even less, like 25, right? And they all kind of know each other because they're all in their same group. And so what he found is he would go to one, he would get them switched to ConvertKit. He would go to another one, get them switched to ConvertKit. By the time he got to like the 3rd or 4th or 5th one, they had all heard that their friends were switching, because they all talk. They're all in the same niche, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time he got to like the 5th, 6th, 7th one, they were like, I feel like everyone on the internet is switching to ConvertKit. That's one of the quotes he has. And it's not. It's just that, of the 25 major food bloggers, he got 3 of them to switch, and now now every other one thinks that everybody's switching. So you get like this real knock-on effect, especially if the niche kind of talks to each other and is small. And so that really, that's really a benefit of targeting a super small one, focusing on a super small one, one at a time. Yeah.
And you can get that benefit without niching. When those paleo food bloggers went to ConvertKit.com, they saw probably a generic, this is a generic marketing tool, but you do get those network effects of everyone in the space knowing about it. It makes so much sense. I'm going to just blatantly copy what Nathan Barry did, which I knew about before, but that framing of focusing instead of niching, like that really clicked something for me. And I'll link in the show notes. Nathan Barry has a recent Twitter thread about what he did at ConvertKit, and he's now making insane amounts of money, tens of millions a month or something ridiculous. Cool. Number 2, buying is harder than selling. This was from April Dunford's talk. April Dunford is the author of Obviously Awesome, one of the canon books in the micropreneur space. And it's this idea that, like, she at the beginning of her talk asked the audience, who here thinks selling is hard? And it's a room full of developers who are all at MicroConf, so they can figure out how to market. So everyone's hand goes up, and she's like, okay, yeah, of course. Buying is harder than selling. And then she explained what she meant by that like, she told this great story about she had to buy a toilet because she moved into a new house or something and had to replace one of the toilets. And she goes to the toilet store, and there's a million toilets. And the salesperson comes up to her and says, hi, can I help you? And she said, yes, I'm here to buy a toilet. And the salesperson says, what kind of toilet would you like? And she's like, I don't know. It's a toilet. And he's like, sort of annoyed. Goes, well, you go look around and tell me which toilet you want. And she just felt overwhelmed and like embarrassed that she didn't know what kind of toilet she wanted. So she left the toilet store, not buying a toilet, and went home to research what kind of toilet she wanted, and found out all these technical details of like, there's statistics on how much solid waste a toilet can flush, and the higher rated ones can flush something like 2 pounds of solid waste.
Yep.
Which is a image that's in my head now that she put in everyone's head at the talk. And you know, all these things of like how much water do they use, and tankless versus tank, and it's this infinite complexity, which I resonate with, because like anytime I make a purchasing decision, I feel like that's the process I go through, and then by the end of it, I emerge a week later and I know everything about whatever the product category is. I did this recently with smart home stuff and just knew everything about smart home stuff. And April, in her journey to try to find a new toilet, just felt sort of overwhelmed by like, I still don't know. I have all these technical details. I know a lot more about what toilets are and how the professionals measure them, but I still haven't answered what's the right toilet for me. So she goes to a new toilet store, and the salesperson goes up to her and says, "Hi, you're probably looking for a toilet, right?" Like jokingly. She's like, "Ah, yeah, I am." And he's like, "Man, buying a toilet sucks, doesn't it? It's like overwhelming, and you probably just want to get a toilet and never have to think about it again." She was like, "Yes, exactly. You get me." Just starting with empathy, like he understands her perspective. And he simplified it for her. He was like, "Look, here's the first decision you need to make. The toilets on this side of the store are cheaper than the toilets on this other side of the store. The cheaper toilets are toilets that aren't used very frequently. So it's like if it's in your basement or if it's in a side room or a powder bathroom. So that's the first choice you need to make. Are you buying a toilet that's going to be used frequently, like once or multiple times a day, or infrequently?" She was like, "Oh, I understand that. It's going to be used frequently. This is for a bedroom." So he was like, "Great. Next question. Is your bathroom big or small? Because if it's small, you probably want tankless, where you put the tank in the wall, save a little space in your bathroom. But if your bathroom's bigger, you probably don't need to worry about that. You can have your tank outside." And she was like, "Oh, well, I understand that. I think my bathroom's pretty big, but here's the diagram. Do you think that's a big bathroom?" And he looked at it and was like, "Oh, yeah, that's a big bathroom. You don't need to worry about the tankless." And then he had a third question that was, I don't remember. Something about, I don't remember. It was a third question that she understood that was along the same lines. Do you remember?
One of them was like decorative versus functional, basically.
Yeah. Like the fancy ones that are like gold plated or something else. He was like, "Yeah, I don't need that." So he said, "Okay, great. After those three questions that you understood, we're left with these two toilets, and this one's more expensive than the other one." And she said, "Wow, that drastically simplified what my decision choices were. Well, of these two, which would you recommend?" And he said, "Well, this one is more expensive, but I've never had anyone have any problems with it. So personally, I would go with this one." So she was like, "Great, sold. I'll buy it." And the point of her talk was like, what a fantastic experience. What a service that she's walking away from that now with enough knowledge that if someone asked her, "Why did you get this particular toilet?" she would say, "I can tell you exactly why I got this toilet, because it's used frequently and it's in a big enough bathroom that I don't need it to be tankless and I didn't need it to be decorative. And this is the best one for that." So what he did was like reframe the decision criteria in a tree where each node in the tree, each choice was something that she understood. It wasn't like, how many pounds of solid waste do you need to flush in the toilet? Because that's like, what does that even mean? How do I make that decision as a customer? That's not a problem in the words that I'm framing the problem. So I love that framing of how to sell something. Your job as a salesman is to understand the marketplace and to reframe the choices you have to make in words that the customer understands, and map the landscape as you understand it, dumb it down, simplify it to actually teach them something. And if you're doing that authentically, if you're not, trying to push them towards your product, but maybe you have a comparison sales page. For me, that would be like Dropbox file requests versus file inbox. Me doing that honestly, I would send some people to Dropbox file requests. There are some people that makes a lot more sense. So if I'm educating people in an authentic way to build more trust, I would be saying, okay, in these circumstances, if you have a file upload request thing that's going to be used frequently, that's not one of the ones I would use. I still need to think about this. Then you should use this thing over this other thing. So that was fundamental point number 2 that I learned. What are your thoughts on buying being harder than selling?
Yeah, this one was probably my favorite talk because it had, like, she started with that premise that if you think selling is hard, then basically try buying a piece of software. And from that, flowed all these other things that were just, I had heard all this before, but it like stuck in my mind in a different way. Mm-hmm. There's so many great takeaways in the talk, so definitely read your recap or watch the talk when it comes out. But like even things like so like you said that you should have a page which may direct some people to other competitors' products in this comparison kind of page. He calls that like a buyer's guide, basically. And the idea is that you know more about this market than your buyer does, almost certainly. And the buyer is probably like some boss said, we need, email marketing tracking, and then told some project manager to go buy it. That project manager doesn't want to do this really either, so they just want to pick one that sort of works. And so if you have a big page and you sort of truthfully lay out the differences between your SaaS and someone else's, then, even though it's coming from a biased source, they'll still respect that. And it's good to, one of our points was it's good to turn away people because they would have churned anyway, probably. They would have gotten into your thing and that would have been like a new trial and you would have been all excited and then they would have just churned after a few months. Yeah. So yeah, you'll have less, support requests and you'll have better customers and your customers will be happier if you like truthfully talk about your product in a way that they understand in their words, not your words. And you, so those are my takeaways as well. And yeah, so one of the things I'm doing for Acorn Chat is writing a buyer's guide just from that. Yeah. Cause there's 100 or more options for live chat widgets. Yeah. And, so I'm going to go through all of them basically and learn what they do myself and then sort of talk about, the major ones and how they're different. And, that's also good for SEO too. Cause like people will be searching for that. So yeah, that was probably my favorite talk.
The buyer's guide specifically for Acorn Chat makes a lot of sense to me. And we talked a little bit about this in person in Minneapolis. I think, so yeah, you can be the really good toilet salesman for the right. live chat. And I was surprised that in Rob Walling's talk, he had sort of a grab bag talk of like a bunch of tips generically of things to do to improve your SaaS. And one of them was have a live chat widget that goes to Slack. And he mentioned two things that were not your thing. So I imagine there are more of them. But I'm curious how you're framing that high-level buyer's guide. Have you thought about like in what circumstances someone should use Intercom over Acorn Chat and how your product is differentiated from any of the other ones on the Slack App Store?
Yeah, so the main thing right now, and this is something else too, which is the buyer's guide will probably change every maybe 6 months as I add features and stuff like that. But right now, large teams should use something else because this is not like this doesn't have multiple customer service, teams based on hours and all that stuff. Like mine is simple, right? So this is for the, solo dev or small team who wants something simple. So right. that's pretty easy switch altogether. The next is like I talked to a lot of people at MicroConf who use live chat through their CRM or through another thing. So like Help Scout has one, Intercom obviously, Intercom is famous for live chat, but they have a lot of features. Like they're a total customer solution. And then there's others. And so if you already have live chat in your CRM, like you should probably just use that. Like I can't compete with something that's integrated that deeply. And then I have some other things, but even just those two big options, like I think that shows if I put those in a buyer's guide, it'll show buyers that, I'm not trying to be something I'm not trying to be this huge customized solution. And, hopefully it builds trust basically as they read it.
Something I love about those two questions is that's something I can really easily answer as a client, from my perspective. I'm a business owner trying to get live chat in my site. And you're asking me, okay, is your team big?
Right.
I'd love a number on that. Like, I don't know, over.
Yeah, I was trying to think. Probably like 10 people, maybe something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, does your organization have more than 10 people? I know that. I can answer that very quickly. No, it does not. If it is, probably want to use something like Intercom because that has much more team features. If not, keep going. Do you already have live chat in your CRM? I don't know if I do. Not in your CRM or like help software.
Yeah, I have to think about how to word that because there's there's CRMs with them, there's help software with it, like help desk ones with them, there's like customer success that also have them bolted on, and so I need to figure out a way to kind of group that all together. But yeah,
I think I would want to be asked like, are you already using any of the following software, and then list the software that has any of the following help desk software or something else.
Yeah.
And if I'm already using Help Scout, maybe I didn't even know that it had this live chat feature. I'm using Groove right now, and I don't know if that has live chat. I don't think it does. But yeah, that would be the next criteria is like, are you using any of the following software? If you are, the easiest thing for you to do is just going to be to use the feature in that software of what the live chat is. If not, keep going. And then I think the keep going is like, are you already in Slack? And if you're already in Slack and you fit these other criteria, if you like living it, for me, that would be a no. I don't use Slack. I have nothing that I'm using Slack for, so I would probably need to find something else. But if you are using Slack and you've matched the criteria before, and whether or not I'm using Slack, like that's a question I can answer. I know whether or not I'm using Slack. Then you want to use something like Acorn Chat. And if not, I don't know, maybe there's a text-based one that you can recommend, or maybe there's a mode of Acorn Chat that doesn't work for you, Slack. You're pretty tightly integrated into Slack, though, and you probably don't want to.
Well, so that's why. So I am currently like it is all in Slack, but I could see a future where in 6 months I have a dedicated app and maybe like a Twilio text feature, and maybe even an integration with Microsoft Teams. Although I don't like Microsoft Teams, so I probably won't build that very quickly. But if people ask for it, maybe I will. So
another thing to mention. I don't think this is a decision point, but in the section on is your team big, I think mention the pricing of Intercom, because that goes up real fast.
Yeah, so that's part. So there's a few different parts to a buyer's guide. One is like, is your software good for them or not? And the other is all about the way different software in your space works. And so one of the ways that software in the space works is pricing. And so I don't have per user per seat pricing. Mm-hmm. Intercom does, or Intercom's pricing is very confusing. We'll say that, and it goes up really fast. And so so something that should be in a buyer's guide is Intercom has all these features, but is also crazy expensive.
Yep.
So if you're not looking to spend a crazy amount of money, then use one of these other pieces of software.
Yeah. I think question number 2 should go before question number 1. Are you already using the software that would already have it, and then Intercom could be one of those pieces of software. And that's true. Because that's going to be the easiest thing. And then if I'm not, then, well, is your team big or small? If it's big, you probably want to start using one of those previous things, probably Intercom. And then if it's small, then we go to Acorn Chat. Love it. I need to do the same thing for File Inbox. I want to chew on that more, though. Cool. That is point number 2 that I learned. Buying is harder than selling. Point number 3 did not come from a talk. This came from a late night conversation between you and me and Josh Kaufman and Shai Schechter. I'm optimizing for experience instead of business growth, and that's okay. I was lamenting to the 3 of you that like I sort of felt like I was being washed in these feelings of inadequacy and like guilt of like, man, I've met 3 more people today who are making more than $1 million a year, and I'm not. And like, what am I doing? I've been going to this conference for like 7 years. How like they make it look easy, and I feel like I know all the steps. Like every talk, it's like the same sorts of thing. I'm like, well, we figured out marketing and we got product market fit, and then we just hammered home on selling it after we figured out a marketing channel that worked, and had a straightforward product and raise prices. Done, making $1 million a year. And I just felt like it was easy for me in that framing to be thinking back over the last 7 years of like, what have I been doing? And Josh had really helpful advice that I've been optimizing for experience instead of business growth. I've been doing a bunch of work of like going to therapy and figuring out relationships and cultivating a bunch of different hobbies. And as a allude to Sherry Walling's talk of things to do to prepare for exiting your business, I've been developing my identity outside of being a business owner. This is not the only thing in my life. I got a lot of other stuff going on. I'm doing lost wax casting and paramotoring and rock climbing and a bunch of other stuff. So, and to have the focus to build one of these huge businesses takes away from something else. And I think there's some efficiency in that you and I have discovered recently of like, we can be consistently pushing forward SaaS business without making too big of a sacrifice on other stuff. It can just be 2 hours every workday, and we can be making meaningful progress. But it helped me clarify, like, that's not what I'm after. Like, I would, if I was making, $50K a month, which I know so many people who have gotten to that point and then exceeded it. Like, I can't imagine doing something with more money than that. Like, there's nothing I would be doing after reading all these books about wealth and entitlemania and, like, how the ultra wealthy live. Like, there's nothing. There's, like, at that point, I could, charter private planes and, I'd buy a ridiculous house, and, like, there's nothing I need that would be enabled by that money. I don't feel this, like, hole in me of that I feel like I have to prove something to someone else that I can make a bunch of money. So that helped clarify that, like, it's okay. Like, I can listen to this person's talk about how they're making 1.4 million ARR and not just feel like a total piece of garbage that, like, I'm not doing that. I can, like, be happy for them, and, like, that's great. You had this goal and you achieved it and you're succeeding at it. That's great for you. And I have differently tuned goals. Part of my goals are, like, am I sleeping really well? That's that has an equivalency in ARR. Like, I would sacrifice this much ARR in order to be sleeping as well. So that just helped me, like, solidify feeling good with where I am. What are your thoughts on optimizing for experience?
Yeah, it's easy to go to a conference like MicroConf where basically everyone's goal is to make money, not at a job. And so the optimal thing is whatever makes you the most money. Like, that's sort of an underlying sort of trend. But it's okay to do the suboptimal thing, because for us that's not the end goal, right? Like, you and I are both making enough money to cover expenses. I would like to be making more money with less effort now. Right now, I feel like I'm doing a lot of things, and so one of the reasons that I'm trying, putting effort into SaaS is so that hopefully it can be put on some kind of autopilot, or more autopilot, which I know is not true, actually. Like, like, I know when I get there, I'm going to be spending all my time thinking about SaaS, and so we'll push off that conversation for now. But yeah, like, I had similar conversations where I knew, like, I kept saying, I know I could make more money if I focused on one thing, like, I know lots of things, but I like doing 4 or 5 things. Yeah. And so, yeah, I haven't fully, I don't have any more clarified thoughts around that right now, except that, yeah, it's okay to do the suboptimal thing because it's your life, right? And so you do what makes you feel good, as long as, like, you have the basics covered, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I think we're similarly aligned.
The balancing force to that is that I want to make sure I'm not just making excuses. Like,
yeah,
this is sort of just like a general life strategy, but you have to be okay with where you are, while at the same time working to be better. And I think it's easy for me to get caught up in feeling like I can't be happy with where I am because I'm not yet where I want to be going. But you can. There is this sort of, like, Zen-like, you can be where you are and you can be very happy with where you are and you can still keep trying to move forward. So if I go too far on the complacency side, if I go too far on the Zen, just accepting perfectly where I am, I feel like I wouldn't have discovered things like, oh, if I co-work with Chris for 2 hours every day, I get a lot more done, and it's in this direction that I really enjoy. So it's a balance. I do still want to be setting goals and pushing forward and changing my identity, while at the same time working on being happy and content with where I am. Because if I'm only future focused, once I get there, I'm going to be just as unhappy as I am right now. Yeah. So it's you need to be doing both things at the same time, and that can be difficult.
Yeah, Jason Cohen has a great end of one of his MicroConf talks, his old ones, about this too. He's like, so you have this goal, right? Say it's to make $20K a month per founder in your startup. That seems like a pretty good life, right? But when you get there, your startup will be growing still, because that's what successful startups do. Yeah. And then what? Like, it's the and then what question, which was kind of the point of Sherry's talk too, except for hers was after an exit. But Jason's point was, like, you have a successful startup. Now it is a a profitable, successful startup, and you have to worry about like servers going down and customers, whatever, and hiring more people, and now you're overloaded, and so yeah, there's no magical end state basically.
Yeah.
So you have to be happy with where you are while also trying to improve your situation. Yeah, it's a balance for sure.
It's so easy to think about the position that other people are in and be thinking and lamenting like, oh man, if only I was in this person's position. I think you had a few conversations like that where you heard about people's like Slack App Store businesses or their WordPress plugin businesses, and you were like, oh man, that sounds like a dream. That's so nice. For me, it was I have had this framing since meeting Josh Kaufman that like he sells books, and how great are books? Because you write them once and then you get them published, and then there's no customer support. The book never crashes. You don't have to worry about like people unable to read your book because you pushed a change to the book that made it unable to compile. And it's the same residual income. It's like you're doing nothing and money keeps rolling in. And we both had a conversation with Josh where he was like, man, I look at SaaS and I'm just like, that seems like a dream because you don't have to go on tour. You don't have to be this very egoic, like selling yourself. And that's exhausting. And also the revenue is much higher, so you don't need as many customers. You don't have to be famous to be successful. Your business identity can be decoupled from your personal identity. And then I was talking with someone else who is making an obscene amount of money, and they're having a lot of struggles with their co-founder. And like that's the overwhelming emotional coloring to their day-to-day experience is like they show up at work and the work is really enjoyable and the numbers are all going up, but like numbers going up is sort of bad because that means it's going to be that much harder to get rid of their co-founder or to come to some sort of an agreement of what's going to happen. So yeah, there were a few experiences like that where it solidified for me this idea of like your problems are not going to get fixed by getting to a new position. There are new, probably much bigger, harder problems in that new position. And the game is just figure out how to be happy where you are, figure out how to optimize the game for the card you've been dealt. And for us, I think that looks like figure out how to grow our SaaS businesses to a little bit bigger than they are now, like 5 or 10x than they are right now, and do so in a way that's not disrupting our day-to-day lives, that's not increasing stress, and that's the next meaningful step. And also we can both be perfectly happy and content with where we are right now. Where we are right now used to be where past versions of ourselves were dreaming to be. And, past version of me was, I'm sure, mentally thinking like, oh man, once I have a personal assistant, all my problems will be gone. I'll have no more problems in life. Then I'll have really made it. Once I have a Tesla, there's just nothing else that I could ever possibly need. And, I knew that wasn't true, but I am in that position right now, and I'm telling myself the same sorts of stories about like, if revenue was just this much higher, then I would never need anything again. And I know that's not true. There's problems never go away; they just change and get bigger. So working on accepting where I am now, and also continuing to move forward.
Yeah. I had this thought, so I haven't thought about this for very long, but so at MicroConf, like people talk about where they're from and stuff, and I talk about, so I live in Indiana, which has a lot of cornfields, and so it's very boring compared to some of the other places that people live. But like one of the benefits of living like in the Midwest, in the suburbs, like I do, like there's a lot of boring stuff. Like it's not a middle of a city, right? But there's like a sea of houses, and I'm kind of the same as everybody else, which on one level is sort of depressing, but on another level is like, I'm doing just fine. like everybody else is kind of in this together. Like I don't know. Like I'm sort of the same as everybody else. I don't know. Maybe this point isn't making it across because I haven't thought about it very long. But yeah, it's kind of like everybody has their own problems, right? But we all, sort of are just keep on living in our lives and be happy with what you have.
I'm reminded of a social difference I noticed when I was studying abroad in Australia, that there seems to be much more camaraderie and like socialism's the wrong word. America in contrast to Australia, feels very individualistic. It feels very
Yeah.
you need to succeed, and if you got to step on people's heads to do it, then we'll just praise you that much more because you had the courage to fire people who needed to be fired. And in Australia, it felt much more like there were more barbecues. like if someone had food, it was like, let me share this food with everyone else. And talking to people about their ambitions, it wasn't like, I'm going to start a startup and be just like Elon Musk. It was like, well, I'd like to work with my friends and like have a job where my friends are working and we can all hang out together. And I think it's a much happier life that way. And I think shifting my mentality more in that direction would lead to a happier, more fulfilled life.
Yeah. So there's a saying, and I'm pretty sure this is an Australian saying, although it exists in many parts of the world, but it's called the tall poppy syndrome. You know what that is?
Yeah.
And that is like if you get a little too a little too like haughty or a little too tall, right? Then you're just gonna come and get cut down. Like you're not like people kind of resent people who are too ambitious or too like it's looked down upon actually.
Yeah.
And so
versus in the States, that's the game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I like most things in life. I think the optimal solution is somewhere in the middle. Like you have to have some ambition, right, to like push forward. But yeah, if you get too much, then you get really toxic cultures and stuff like that. So yeah.
I have so many other stories from MicroConf, one of which was flying on a trapeze. I ended up injuring my knee like 2 days after that, I think from the trapeze, and I've been like hobbling around for the last 2 days. It's getting much better though.
So that is why. So you could pick an outing, right? And trapeze, bowling, all these things.
Yeah.
I did not pick trapeze because I knew I was going to throw my back out if I did it. Yeah. And then I would be on my back for the rest of MicroConf. So nope.
I thought it was going to be my shoulder, but my shoulder was fine.
Yeah.
I'll include a link to a video of me on the trapeze. the video alone is worth the hobbling around I had to do for 2 days. Yeah. And man, I could talk about this for the next 2 hours. There's a lot of cool stuff that happened, but those are the main things I wanted to hit. Any other takeaways from MicroConf from your end?
It got me excited for SaaS again, which is good. I haven't been to MicroConf since 2019, and I started machine learning since then. In earnest, I started doing other things. I have way too many projects going on. So yeah, I think I've gone too far in the direction of just optimize for experience, and I've sort of gotten away from, when I stopped consulting, basically my income dipped below my expenses, and now to get it up, I either have to start consulting again a little bit, or selling Media Place helped, and then I'm starting a new SaaS, right? So it got me excited to start this new SaaS again, give me more energy to do that. So yeah, my goal now is to not consult again. So yeah, I think it's possible based on my expenses and how long I think, because I have income coming in from other things, and so I'm slowly losing money, and so I do have quite a long runway because I have other income coming in. But yeah, so it got me excited for that.
Wonderful, and I'm also excited. We had a few conversations about Acorn Chat, and there are other competitors. There are other apps like this in the Slack App Store, but like we talked about before, you don't have to be functionally better than any of those other ones. Your competitive difference in the marketplace can merely be that you wrote the buyer's guide, that you are a better I don't like the word Sherpa. You're a guru, or you're the mentor helping
right.
people who have this problem. You can just have more areas where you're helping people. You can have more guides. You can have more videos. You can make your onboarding a little bit better. I'm reminded of restaurants. What is the differentiating factor that makes you go to one restaurant versus another? Well, it's all food. You're gonna eat food at all those different places. It's just a little bit I like the seasoning of these deviled eggs a little bit better, or this restaurant's a little bit closer to me. And if the restaurant's being honest about we serve food for this type of person, and if you're someone else, we are a vegan restaurant. We're for vegans. If you're not a vegan, we recommend you go somewhere else. Go to the steakhouse. And there are so many restaurants that can all thrive in it's the same category. It's the same problem they're all solving. They're all solving the problem of people are hungry and they don't want to cook for themselves. They want to eat with a little bit of novelty, paying money. And that's a quarter of the U.S. market or something. So as long as there exist people who would benefit from, well, that's a convoluted way of saying it. As long as people have the problem of wanting better, higher touch customer support, there will be room for Acorn Chat. And software is nuts. It doesn't cost you anything additional to have more customers. There's just a little bit you have to do of helping people find your thing and helping them solve their problem, having the buyer's guide to help people who are newly educated about this problem, and you can be making a ton of money. I think you talked to someone who has some Slack App Store apps who's just making insane amounts of money.
I think the one you're thinking of was an App Store app, like an iPhone App Store app.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was making $1 million a year.
That's
and
nuts.
I was like, holy cow.
Yeah. Like, that's the game that you're playing. Like, that's feasible. Like, Acorn Chat could be making $1 million a year. That's not unreasonable.
Yeah. How about we start with one customer?
Let's start with one customer. We're on the Slack App Store now, or you have the button on your website that people can add it, but it's not on the Slack App Store.
Yes. So people can add it now. Actually, everything works.
Cool.
And the big news is I submitted to the Slack App Store. So
yeah.
I did that last week. It takes 4 to 6 weeks before you get a response though from the Slack App Store. So I'm waiting 4 to 6 weeks basically. While that's going on, like while everything does work, like I'm building my buyer's guide, I'm putting more. Just today, for example, I put. I decided I'm just going to offer free like concierge, setup basically. So like you were talking about, a differentiating factor for me is, I will get on an hour-long call for a $30 a month customer, and I will install this on your, whatever WordPress website or something.
Yep.
So I put basically instructions how to install it, and then I said, if you need help, email me basically, and I'll do it for you. And so yeah, that's enough. That's a differentiating factor, right? And DHH has a great phrase. He used this in the 2008 startup school talk that he gave, and he calls it just a nice Italian restaurant on the internet. Like, not enough people are building just nice Italian restaurants on the internet. So yeah, he used the same metaphor of restaurants, and like there is it technically, yes, you're competing with everyone in the world, and so it's not the same as restaurants who are just competing locally, but yeah, it's like you can just build a nice Italian restaurant on the internet. So yeah, that's what
I don't think I've seen that before.
It is a fantastic talk. It's if you're ever down about like making sort of a micro business, like, if you think you have to raise a bunch of money and swing for the fences, he's like, no, you don't. You can, or if you ever, one of my favorite quotes from that talk is, if you think you're too late to a market, right? He talks about Zappos, and he's like, Zappos is selling shoes. People have sold shoes before. So, yeah, it's a fantastic talk.
Yeah. Apple also famously late, but really nail whatever the market is. You said something very interesting, which is that the verbiage of your concierge onboarding is, if you need help, email me. And I'm curious why it's not a live chat widget.
Very good question. One is because I'm a solo dev, and so I'm only online for part of the day. So
if only there was a feature.
My live chat widget actually is on that page. So yeah,
okay,
I could do that too. Actually, what I was really planning to do was like a more fully featured like integration for like you click a button and like schedule a time and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was way faster to say, here's my email address. And
for
so
sure.
I'm basically gonna see if anyone emails me, and I'm using it as like a test to see. Yeah. So.
Yeah. The friction to email, I think, is much higher because you click on that email link and you're at a blank email page and you don't know what to do. At minimum, I would love to see that you pre-fill in the email with the subject and a body of like, I'd like to take you up on your offer to onboarding. Here is the URL of my website.
That's a great idea.
And I agree that like a Calendly or a SavvyCal link is way better because that's that jumps them ahead 4 steps of we're at scheduling, and I have my calendar right there, and I can see where the gap is, and that's a lot less back and forth, and then people just show up on your calendar. That's what I'd be pushing for. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I like that idea. Really, I could fill in almost all the information for them, so they could basically click a button and then click another button to send it. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I want to do that too. Now that we're talking about it, that seems like an obvious way to trade time for higher MRR. And yeah, especially in the beginning, it makes so much sense to spend an hour on the phone with a customer for a $30 a month customer because you're getting so much out of that conversation.
Yeah. I would pay people $30 to set it up for them.
Yeah.
Because I get to talk to them for an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do that with your first 100 customers.
Maybe they get a free month if you have me set it up for you or something ridiculous, you know? Like
I don't think you need to do that.
I don't either.
That like I would feel like that was weird as a customer. Like, something's not right here. Yeah. Like if I went to a restaurant and they were like, "We'll pay you $10 to try our new appetizer," I'd be like, "I don't think I want that appetizer.
That's a good
Why
point.
are you paying me?" But the value justifies itself.
Yeah.
Cool. I love manual onboarding, doing things that don't scale. Free concierge onboarding. Any other hot takes, key takeaways from MicroConf?
Oh, those are the big ones. Yeah, buying is hard. That was my biggest takeaway. Like that was the second talk or something, and like it would have been worth it if I just heard that line.
Yeah,
buying is hard.
Yeah. Which she said like in the first 5 minutes or something.
Yep.
Cool. I have 2 things in the 10 minutes we have left that I would love your hot take on. These are things that we've talked about before on the podcast and that we've also talked about offline, but I want to talk about it again.
All right.
One of them, so I'm working on this app for my friend Trig, who's a magician, and I'm being a little cagey because I can't talk about exactly what it is, but it's something I've already made for myself that is a Google Voice front end for Twilio. So like in Google Voice, you have the messages list on the left, and you click on a message, and then you have the message thread, and you can send and receive it from the web interface, and then it also shows up on the mobile app. Oh, I just activated my Google. I shouldn't say that word. This has been useful for me because I'll have a Twilio number and I'll have a thing that I want to do with it. But also, every once in a while, I want to be able to manually mess with it. The attaboy.dev that we did is an example of this. Like, right. I have the whole interface of automatically replying to people with these AI-generated responses. But also, it'd be kind of nice to be able to look in and see what the threaded response was without having to make an API call and be able to like manually interject something to send to people. I think that'd be really cool. And I think other people might want to use this too. Like, I know my friend Trig needs something like this, and I have done zero market research, but I imagine there's other people who want a sort of interface like this. So I'm thinking about, so the way that I built it is all in Firebase, and I have all my components for Stripe integrations with Firebase. It would be like, now with my new calibration of how long work takes, it would be less than a week's worth of POMs to get this to a point where it's sellable, where there's some minimal onboarding, where there's a landing page talking about what this is, a little buyer's guide of like, here's what the landscape is, and people could go to the page and sign up and enter their Twilio credentials and pay me money. I also don't want to lose focus from File Inbox. What is your thought on how I should be thinking about this project?
Yeah, my big question is who's going to use it? You also described it to me. I already know what it does, and so that's kind of cheating. Like, it took me 2 attempts before the call to understand what it even does, and so like I don't think you have your story quite right about like what it is and who would use it.
Okay.
So I think you need to focus on that. And yeah, given that you have File Inbox with a customer ready to use your new thing, I would spend all your time getting that ready for him to use before focusing on this. Like I could see how parts of this new Twilio thing could be useful, but I worry that it's sort of a infinitely deep rabbit hole of who would use it and what features you need to build or how you would need to market it and stuff. And so I see it as interesting, but probably a distraction right now from File Inbox. That's my hot take.
Okay. Yeah. That's reasonable. That's okay. I think I've had all the technical pieces slide into place, but I agree that I don't yet know what the story of it is, and I don't yet know what the market is. So I think I'm just going to keep sitting on this until I know what that marketing is, until I know who it's for, and then I can launch this very quickly as a SaaS. But I do need to figure out the marketing piece of it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think you're missing I basically think you're missing like some story on the front. So I don't. Like, anyone who would use it as it is now could probably just go to Twilio, like, because it feels very developer-y, although the way you're describing it was actually that it's not developer-y, but it still feels that way to me. Like, it's sort of a generic interface. and they have to know what Twilio is and all that stuff. But I think there's probably some use case for like sales reps, or some use case for like if you found a specific use case, I think it could be useful. But
yeah. Okay, market research needs to be done. And if I could find like a Reddit thread of people being like,
yeah,
phrasing this problem in a way that makes sense to them.
Yeah. Or if you could find competitors, like if there's competitors that do this, look at how they approach marketing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I will say though, you mentioned I shouldn't be doing this until I have FileInbox to a state where my one customer can use it. I shipped that, and he has an active subscription right now. Brian is a paying member of FileInbox using the new platform.
Fantastic.
And I think is receiving his first submissions like now. But that was a thing that I ironed out right before leaving the MicroConf. That was like the last POM on Friday
awesome.
that I did.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that feels really good. Quick take number 2. Also something we had talked about before. So in our conversation about app stores and how if it's sort of this smaller marketplace where you can game the system in the app store. And you had said that you had talked to someone who specializes in apps for, I think it was the Atlassian App Store, and was just making a killing. Am I remembering that correctly?
I talked to several app store people. It could have been Shopify or Atlassian or Slack. Yeah, I talked to all those people. Yeah.
The thing that stuck out to me was that it was a more business focused app store that I think was Atlassian, and like they were making per seat like 10 times more than someone could reasonably charge on the Slack app store, which makes sense to me because that's more of a business minded people. And in the conversation we had, we were like, I kind of just want to do one of these for fun. Yes, of course, It's a grass is greener situation, and I'm sure there are pitfalls of being on that app store that aren't good. Like, eventually if you get too big, the core app just takes over your thing, and then overnight your business is gone. And at the same time, I have a really good idea for a thing that I want.
All right, cool.
That I just want for myself, which is a tree map graph. I don't know why it's called a tree map. It's like a computer science tree was your idea. But it's a grid with a bunch of squares in it, and bigger categories are bigger squares that contain smaller squares. And I want that graph for all of my business expenses, which are all in QuickBooks. So I want this thing to be a QuickBooks app that you have a one-click add-on, and then you have a new screen on your QuickBooks thing that shows you where you're spending your money in this visual hierarchy, very similar to Grand Perspective was an older app for macOS that showed you file sizes, and that's really good for being able to manage your hard disk space, because you look and you're like, oh my gosh, what's this huge blob? Oh, it's this DMG that I downloaded that I don't need anymore. Let me take that out. And it can be for all these hidden small things. And then it's much better than like sorting by size, or in the QuickBooks analogy, sorting by like the amount of the thing is, because this visualization can also show you if you have a whole bunch of tiny things, files or expenses that are all in the same bigger category, you can treat those equivalently with single things that are really big, and manage this problem of either freeing up hard disk space or freeing up expenses. And this is another thing that mentally I'm like, in a week I could probably, like, I've done the technical part of it, which is taking expenses and rendering those as a tree map. That's a really straightforward problem. And to get something on the QuickBooks store, the last time I dug into this, looked about as hard as getting something on the Slack App Store, which I guess, saying that out loud, as we've seen, that was much harder for you than you were thinking originally. But I think this is something I could reasonably get done in like 2 weeks. Just get something out there, charge something for it, and it would be kind of fun to dip my toes into this app marketplace and just see what that was like. How should I be framing that in terms of POM allocation?
Yeah, so this one, I think we talked about this like 6 months or maybe even more ago. I really like this idea because I haven't really seen it for budgeting before. And yeah, I think it's called Disk Inventory something, so, some free app for Mac. Yeah. And it's great for looking at files. And so I imagine it'd be great for looking at expenses. It's interesting because on one hand, you want to just see what the QuickBooks store is like, and the longer time you're in a store, the more sales you'll get. So optimize for getting it in the store. Like, yeah, sure. Like just spend a week and get it in the store. On the other hand, it's probably a significant distraction from File Inbox. You are close to starting to switch people over to the serverless. And so could you do something like, I don't know, like you already have administrative POMs. Could you call this your I don't know, what are you calling it? Your passion project or your extra project or whatever.
Yeah.
And sort of reward yourself for doing File Inbox things by working on getting something in the QuickBooks store. Or does that not excite you at all?
That would excite me. That's a very good answer. I'm sort of doing that right now with this project with Trig. Except today. Today I spent all day working on the Twilio project for Trig. How I was working on that project was like, after I've done all my mandatory work of pushing File Inbox forward, I can do whatever I want. And one of the things I can do is paramotoring, and another thing I can do is working on apps for fun. And so work that's been able to squeeze into there is like working on my flashcard app and working on my book reader and working on the smart home project and working on resin 3D printing. So I think if I treat it and like mentally framing it, like it's sort of interesting that this is something I find fun, but like getting an app in the QuickBooks App Store, like that would be fun.
Yeah, it's a neat idea. Yeah.
Yeah, some people play video games, and I make apps that could potentially make a lot of money. Okay, that's reasonable. That'll be my. I love treating File Inbox as sacred. That like that's the thing. I have to work on this for a minimum amount of time per day, and it's not that much. It's not draconian. It's 2 hours. That's fine, and then it sets the pace for the whole rest of the day. That feels really good, and then I've got the whole rest of the day to do whatever I want. And one of those things can be getting an app in the QuickBooks App Store, and that's a potentially extremely valuable place for me to be spending time. That feels really good.
Yeah, and I like this idea better than the previous Twilio idea because there is a marketplace that is going to do some marketing for you. And so like people go on that QuickBooks App Store to look for things to help them with budgeting. This is a thing that could help them with budgeting. So like it's a cleaner story in my mind.
Yep. It also makes a lot of sense for me because like this is a thing that I want. I would love to be able to go to QuickBooks and click a button and see this. Yeah, cool. I think that's all I got.
That's all I got too.
Then I'll see you sooner than next week. We're going to have a podcast guest. Maybe. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yes. We should. The next episode after this should be a special podcast guest if everything goes well. Yeah.
Yes, we'll see. To listeners of this podcast, I think I may have fixed the audio issue in the last episode, and that should carry over to this episode. If anyone notices a difference, please let me know. And if you don't notice, maybe don't tell me.
Well, I definitely noticed because
maybe that's all that matters.
I started posting last week's episodes, and it just whatever was wrong got worse last week, and so I finally told you like this is not going well. So
yes, the new one though, that does sound better to you.
Yeah, the new one that got posted this week or yesterday or whatever.
Okay,
sounds better. Yeah.
Okay, I think we fixed it then. Okay, that's it. I'll see you later. Goodbye.
All right. See you. Bye.